Return with us once again to a simpler time when the biggest threat to secretive government-funded mad scientists unleashing unspeakable horrors on the world were a bunch of kids on bikes with flashlights and no curfew. You can take the Will out of Hawkins, Indiana, but you can't take the eldritch horror out of Will, or at least his friends. They've broken the cardinal rule. They split up the party just in time for the Upside Down's boss level to unlock. With 3 seasons under their belt outshining the adults, there's a lot to return to. So let's see how those seasons echo through Season 4, Part 1. Spoilers ahoy! The problem with saving the world multiple times from shadowy organizations that are overseen by even shadowier government organizations is no one but you and your shadowy government contacts know you did it. To the rest of the world, you're just the weirdos running around frantically before that unexplained thing in the sky happened. Yeah, but anyway, did you hear about Tammy Thompson? She totally went to Nashville to become a famous singer. During Season 3, Steve spent his summer doling out ice cream at Scoops Ahoy with Robin Buckley. Initially, they have a contentious relationship, but they become friends by saving the world and bonding over their love for the ladies, even though they might not have the same tastes. Robin confesses that she has a crush on classmate Tammy Thompson, who aspired to be a singer. Steve insists that Robin is hearing her singing through rose-covered ears, suggesting that she sounds like a Muppet. Now, Season 4 opens with a Hawkins High basketball game, complete with the national anthem sung by local girl gone big-ish time, Tammy Thompson.
Tammy Thompson!
Time appears to have given Robin perspective, or perhaps her new crush has allowed her to reevaluate her old crush's voice, finally agreeing with Steve that she does, in fact, sound like a Muppet. Good news for Robin, though. Her crush agrees. That's not so bad. She can make a career out of singing about rainbows and the difficulty of being green. One of the biggest hurdles our plucky kids are facing in Season 4 so far is that their secret weapon has been benched. The previous 3 seasons, when psychic push came to telekinetic shove, they could rely on the girl with a penchant for waffles and superpowers. It's pretty handy to have someone who can move stuff with her mind and travel through an ethereal realm to spy on people. And that's not to say that defeating the baddies with her mind and a mean stare has been a walk in the park. In the first season, she had to dig so deep to stop the Demogorgon that everyone thought she was lost in the effort. As it turns out, 11 knew she had it in her because that's what she did to banish 1. 1 is the patient zero of the superpower superset who manipulated 11 into taking his limiter out. After he went on his kill rampage, 11 reflected on her memories of her mother to give her the strength to push 1 through to the Upside Down. It's not an exaggeration to say that some crazy things happen in Hawkins. Apparently, they've been happening for a while thanks to the top-secret research facility raising orphans with superpowers to help win the Cold War. A plan that's certain to not go terribly, terribly wrong. But it turns out that the well-guarded facility with mysterious government vehicles coming in and out of it wasn't everyone's first guess when it comes to crazy things going on. In Season 1, when Steve was still kind of a heel, his first guess for where 11 came from was the nearby Pennhurst Asylum. Now, he was wrong about 11, but in Season 4, Pennhurst does in fact turn out to be the answer to where Victor Creel was, the man that everyone thought was responsible for gruesome murders decades earlier. Of course, it wasn't Creel, but the eldritch horror that torments the town of Hawkins and surrounding areas. Turns out, Creel's son had discovered the ability to reach into people's minds and manipulate objects, primarily by breaking all their bones. Then he's used to make all the other experiments before 11 shoves him into the Upside Down to take on his final form. Season 2 of Stranger Things lands in the wake of the seminal big-budget sci-fi comedy Ghostbusters. Like most kids in the 80s, the kids, henceforth referred to as the party, was completely taken with Ghostbusters, which is fitting given the shenanigans that they end up getting into. Centered around Halloween, the party dresses up as the Ghostbusters. By Season 4, the kids are in 1986. That's a whole summer beyond Back to the Future and getting ready to watch Tom Cruise take to the skies in Top Gun, and the crew of the Enterprise would be flying back to the 80s to poach some whales for a space cigar that was their pen pal. It was a weird time. Now, despite the new stuff to obsess over, Dustin doesn't just discard his past loves. Like a proper 80s kid who might grow up to write nostalgia-tinged reflections on pop culture, he's all in. So his rucksack of gear has an "I've been slimed" pin on it. He's probably the only 80s kid who that statement is also true for. When you get right down to it, 11 has had to deal with things way more intense than a school bully. But while a Demogorgon might consume you or tear your body apart, a bully can hit you deep down in your self-worth and plunge you into a darkness that makes the Upside Down just seem like a mood.
What now?
Despite all the horror that 11 has been through, she also has an earnest innocence where she still says things like friends don't lie and assumes as long as you're not a mad scientist or a walking nightmare monster, everyone has more or less the best intentions. Also, having helped save the world 3 times, when asked to come up with a hero, she can be quite literal, like picking Sheriff Jim Hopper as the hero she makes her diorama about. Her diorama also includes Mr. Fibly the squirrel, who would get up to cute antics. That is certainly an upgrade to the squirrel found in Season 2 when 11 was hiding out in the woods. When there weren't enough Eggos left behind or stolen, she used her powers to make a squirrel into a meal, and a way to get rid of a nosy hunter. High school sports and the pointless pageantry of the pep rally. On one hand, it's an obligatory gathering to celebrate a handful of students playing a game that only they will remember. But on the other hand, it means that math class will be cut off early and all you have to do is listen to the guy who keeps knocking the books out of your hands talk about the coming game as if it were the trail of our lifetimes. Opening Season 4, there's a pep rally for the basketball team that has party member Lucas as a bench warmer. Team captain and all-around heel Patrick McKinney takes the mic and acknowledges the rough year or so that Hawkins has had, even if he didn't know that it was because of dueling Russian and American experiments to harness the powers of darkness. Now, he acknowledges the fire at the mall while naming some of the other losses they've suffered. First up are Jack and Melissa, who we've never met, but next up is Heather, Billy's fellow lifeguard and first Mind Flayer victim. Billy himself is up next. He even manages to refer to Jim Hopper as their heroic police chief. As usual, however, there's no love for Barb. Not everyone forgets. Vecna remembers Barb. Every geek group has that one geek that can't pass. The one that is fully committed to the geek life and makes no apologies for it. For the party, that's Dustin. So when Dustin returned from his summer camp with tales of true love, the rest of the party were a little suspicious that it might be the notorious Canadian girlfriend. You know, the one that you can't talk to because they don't have phones in Canada, but is totally hotter than Phoebe Cates.
No way, hotter than Phoebe Cates?
That Dustin can't raise his new girlfriend on his shortwave radio setup adds to the suspicion. That is, until Suzie comes in with the clutch answer to Planck's constant. That is, also after she forces Dustin to sing a duet of the theme to the never-ending story. Suzie is back in Season 4, providing those mid-80s hacker skills, including the 80s classic of changing a bad grade. Why does a high school in the mid-80s have a server with all the grades on it? Don't worry about it. While everyone in the party has found love of some kind, except for Will, Dusty and Suzie are the only ones who seem to be able to keep it together. And they say long-distance relationships don't work.
Gosh, I miss you, Dusty Bun.
I miss you more, Susie Poo.
For the first half of the premiere season of Stranger Things, Joyce splits her time between trying to convince people Will was alive and that she's not crazy. It didn't help that the way that she found to communicate with Will in the Upside Down was by having him activate lights from the other side. Using Christmas lights that she strung up like the world's strangest Ouija board on her wall, Will would spell out what he needed to say. That was enough for most people to think that she had gone cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Turns out, she was right. When Steve, Nancy, Robin, and Eddie find themselves in the Upside Down, they pull from the Will and Joyce playbook and communicate with the rest of the party via a light bright. Billed as a teen sex comedy, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, directed by Amy Heckerling and written by Cameron Crowe, turned out to be a generational touchstone. It catapulted Sean Penn, and perhaps gave the opening salvo between baby boomers and every generation after them when Judge Reinhold's Brad snaps back at a guidance counselor who tells the teenager who works part-time, takes care of the house for his single parents, and goes to high school that the fun times are over, asking when did the fun times start? But really, mostly, it's remembered for Phoebe Cates coming out of the swimming pool in Brad's fantasy. There have been a few nods to the teen classic, like Steve tossing his Scoops Ahoy cap the way that Brad does when hitting on a girl in the mall. But most directly is when Billy makes his own swimming pool entrance to the delight of the gathered moms to Moving in Stereo by the Cars, the same song that plays when Cates comes out of the pool. Steve points out that when Robin's crush returned her copy of Fast Times, it was at that scene, indicating that she and Robin share a preference. In Season 2, we found out that 11 wasn't the only lab experiment to break free. She wasn't even the first. She was able to catch up with her lab sister, who was enacting her own version of revenge with her gang on the run. 11 got a bit of a goth look and experimented with the darker side before returning to Hopper and the Hawkins gang in an episode that's, well, it's not a lot of people's favorite. During the sensory deprivation-induced trip down memory lane to 1979, Papa mentions 8, who has already flown the coop. When you're on your third being of unimaginable horror that happens to be relatable to the monster you're facing in your Dungeons & Dragons game, it might be time to start at least entertaining the idea that there's a connection. Or maybe switch to Shadowrun for a little bit.